Tired all the time, tired all the time, tired all the time.
Welcome back to Visited by Voices. We are talking today about that elusive white wolf of a definition, the phrase that we hear constantly anymore, kind of is ill-defined, but some maybe over-defined at the same time. Elevated horror, and in particular, we want to talk about the fact that what we call elevated horror is really nothing new.
I really, honestly, I hate the term elevated horror. And I got dressed up because it's like we're talking about elevated horror. I have elevated my appearance tonight. But
Yeah.
I don't like it. Do you like it?
I understand what they're trying to do with it, but I feel like it's just yet another tribal symbol that we throw up in the air to try and find those people who will disagree with everything we say. And I'm a guy who likes a lot of the titles that are called elevated by people, right? Like I'm an A24 mark, right? But here's
Did
the
you
thing.
just say you're a mark?
I did. I
You're
think we've been
using
hanging out.
wrestling lingo.
We've been hanging out with Dan Shine way
Oh
too.
my god, it happened!
Don't worry, it won't happen again.
Okay.
So that term actually comes from carnivals and circuses, by the way. When it's a Barnum and Bailey term, so it didn't originate with the professional wrestling.
I bet it came about in like ancient Greece.
You're probably right on some respect, but it wouldn't have been in English then. So,
well,
I'm gonna go with Barnum.
I'm still gonna stick with wrestling here.
Okay,
that'll be my that's as tribal as I get now.
You think it'll someday be elevated wrestling?
I mean, there's AEW Elevation, but it's terrible. So I'm like, I actually would never want elevated wrestling. That sounds. I mean, that would just be wrestling.
It'd be like the Olympics. No one's watching that.
I don't know. Elevated wrestling might be like just better wrestling with less fucking spot monkey bullshit.
It'd be like a Oscar like level acting.
Yeah.
So, A24 has kind of made a cottage industry out of what gets branded as elevated horror, but they're far from the only ones at the moment. I think that Hammer have experimented with The Lodge, and a bunch of indies have come out that definitely meet the definition, as it were. Maybe we should start with that, actually, though. What is elevated horror?
I keep thinking about it, and the longer I think about it, the more it turns itself on its head and means absolutely nothing. Because, you know, we're used to elevated horror being sort of like we associate with A24. So there's a starting point. So what would the opposite of elevated horror be? It would be more of our trashy, sleazy slasher types, right? Which is funny because those are actually, if we really want to be picky about it, those are more elevated because our fears and our anxieties are so overblown and exaggerated in them. But elevated horror, it's all very subtle. And see, that's why I dislike this term very much. I've been thinking about this for like the last 5 days or so. It's been bothering me for that long.
Well, Scream 5 threw something else in there, which I completely disagree with too, just to muddy the waters. They suggested that it was horror films that had social themes in them, which I would argue any successful horror film has social themes play into them at some point. That's why we find things scary, because we can relate to it, which means they're things from our own environments and our own experiences. So I don't get it. By the same rate, I know what they're going for, right?
Are they referring to social themes or political themes? Because those are two very different things. Like you could have, like, again, most horror films will deal with some sort of mundane fear and, just dig at it. And, if you're very sensitive to something like that, yeah, you're going to have a bad time, or you're going to understand that fear better. We'll see which way it goes. So does the elevated horror that has the social issue, is it just a regular everyday social issue? Say like stranger danger, like worrying about your child going missing or something like that? Or is it, again, something more political like Get Out with systemic racism? So I don't know.
I would say it's more social than political for this reason. Black Christmas, the third remake of that film, is not elevated horror, but it's extraordinarily political.
Yeah. I wonder where we would put that, like, as a category.
In
Is
a
that
red
woke
box
horror?
where you can buy it for $1.99 because no one wants it.
That's $1 too much.
Yeah. Well, I haven't seen it, so I shouldn't really pick on a film I haven't seen, but I do that. I pick on that and I pick on the Bye Bye Man, and I've never seen that either.
The Bye Bye Man was actually a much more competent Slender Man movie than what we got.
Haven't seen that either.
Don't.
So what they think they're going for with this, besides just to create a new club for horror elite to join, is a concept of well-written, real developed themes interjected into a narrative in a way that is progressive for horror narrative, right? So it's not simply we're going to have a bunch of slogans thrown around, because that's the Black Christmas thing, right? It's that we're going to develop ideas in ways that any class of film would be admired for doing, but it happens to be done in the horror genre.
So,
Hereditary.
as far as ideas go, can you give me an example of like what you would consider a developed idea in, like, say, elevated horror versus non-elevated horror?
So, okay, yeah, absolutely. Hereditary is a film, as its title suggests, about fear of kind of the family dysfunction, the family traditions, as well as just the kind of tyranny of your own biology, like the ideas and the customs of your family ultimately causing your own destruction.
Mm-hmm.
That's what Jason Goes to Hell is about too.
Jason Goes to Hell is elevated horror.
No, that's the whole point. Like, one is really well woven in, and one is presented like a pulp novel, which is a completely legitimate place to come for. But yet, again, the people who are big proponents of elevated horror as a clade of the horror genre, they want to make that separation because it makes them feel better about what they're watching. Whereas I'm a huge Hereditary fan. I'm a huge fan of The Witch. I'm a huge fan of Saint Maud. I'm one of the people who really did actually like Men. And yet I'm not watching it because it's supposedly elevated horror. I watch those films because they make me feel a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
I watched Texas Chainsaw Massacre, a film that you would not call elevated horror, because it makes me feel things too.
Oh yeah. Actually, Chris brought that up. He mentioned Texas Chainsaw when I was telling about elevated horror as well.
So I think it's a focus on literary techniques being used in film. And literary, I'm using the word literary, but I really mean like a language of film that is a little bit more sophisticated as far as the storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's legit and it's a good thing, but it's not always appropriate. If you're going to make a wrong turn movie, we really don't want you to be really creative with your storytelling. We don't. It's not appropriate for the container that your story fits into.
Okay, I see your point now. And obviously, I know that there is a lot of overlap between elevated horror and psychological horror, but it's not always necessary to have the psychological elements of horror in an elevated horror movie. But I do find that it seems like a lot of what we categorize as elevated horror does fall into the psychological horror realm already.
Yeah, I think it has a lot to do with where we are in storytelling. I've always said this, and this is something you can hear from a lot of people, not just me, but fiction has fashion. So if you take any decade of writing and look at it holistically, you'll see kind of the same themes, the same ideas, the same presentation, same thematics used over and over. And then about every decade, maybe 12 years if it's a long run, 8 years if it's a short, it morphs into the next thing. And the whole creative community kind of descends on those ideas. And so it's a fashion, it has a fashion wave. And I think that the self-awareness of modern horror is what we kind of, when we say it's psychological, a lot of times we're talking about we're in a character's head and we're seeing things from an unreliable narrator's point of view that's exaggerated. maybe elevated. But I think that the danger there is that that will mean that this whole movement has nowhere to go if that's its only trick, because eventually the fashion will change and then it's just orphaned. There's nowhere to go.
I don't know. I want to continue to see quality horror films, and I really don't care if they're known as elevated or not. If you have a good story and you're putting some effort into it, look, I think that's going to pay off. But I should hope that this is. I mean, what other trends are we going to go with next? I mean, we've had a spate of requels already. I really am not interested in seeing that take off as a full-fledged subgenre. That sounds terrible, but
well, I think the requels are telling us much what the sequels did in the late 80s. That it's time for the next big movement in horror, that we kind of are running out of steam again. And it's kind of funny because in the last 20 years, we've pretty much hightailed it from one movement to the next, whether it was the Saw and Hostel thing or the Scream type of, what I call teen slashers, to ghost movies in The Conjuring,
oh god,
ripoffs, to kind of where we are now, which is that everyone's kind of scraping around looking, right? That's why we'll do a Texas Chainsaw Massacre for Netflix. We'll do another Scream movie and we'll pay the actors, or not. I think it's just, we've been kind of waiting, and that's why we're getting the retreads, which really, when we say requel, it's a retread. It's just another way to package the old thing.
Yep.
I think we need that title that's going to take everyone into the next generation of storytelling. This happened with one of the films I wanted to cover in this video, which is when The Exorcist came out. There was no turning back.
Yeah, that's very true.
The Exorcist said to everything that had come before it, no, you can keep that. We're done. We're done with that. I would also say that there's moments like that. Halloween is another moment, for good or for bad, right?
That's true.
Jaws probably, maybe that Jaws and Halloween probably simultaneously. They're a couple of years apart, but those two films also say, okay, here's the new template. Here's the new fear. And if you think about those two films, they're not all that different if you take the water away.
I prefer Jaws, but yes, I agree.
What's the functional difference between Quint and Dr. Loomis?
Oh yeah, no, for sure. I just Jaws just does it for me the way Halloween doesn't. And no shade to Halloween. It's a great movie. It's fine and wonderfully suspenseful. I like my giant robot shark. And there are some scenes in there that, still occasionally get me from time to time.
Oh, yeah. So I think we're just waiting on that next thing. And I think that when you look at all the repeat titles, whether you're talking Candyman, whether you're talking another Halloween, whether you're talking, another Scream, I think it's just bleeding over that we are ready for that next thing. But we need that next movie. The Exorcist, incidentally, I think meets all the definition of elevated horror. Right? So it's a film about child abuse that is wrapped up in, Christian mythology, that is kind of blatant once you see what it's really about, but hides behind this veneer of, it's a spooky horror film about a demon. It's not. Why would we have a scene in which Reagan McNeil listens to her mother scream at her absentee father, who's out of the picture?
Yeah.
Why would we have a line like, do you have any idea what Burke Dennings would be doing in your daughter's bedroom? Which is a question that's never answered. Why is Burke Dennings' head turned completely around? Think about positionally what has to happen for that to occur. So that subtlety and that intricate storytelling, that woven tapestry of ideas, it's all there. So it's not like Hereditary invented, the concept, or The Witch, I guess, would be the true modern first film that really started to get the elevated horror tag on it. The Exorcist has all of it, and I'd say Exorcist 3 does as well.
Mm-hmm.
Again, thematically, a very different film. It directly tackles the question of evil.
Yeah.
Head on.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I guess maybe I'm just okay. So I guess I'm just terrified of life in general because some of the movies that I was thinking of that really kind of came to me, these are more like existential questions, you know, and very mundane for the most part. And one of them that I was thinking of was 1 Hour Photo with Robin Williams, which no one actually dies in that movie. You get, like one scene of Robin Williams in a dream sequence and his eyes start bursting with blood, and that is pretty much as gory as it gets. But it's all very unnerving, especially because like Psy basically lives in liminal space. He is pretty much that NPC that you are always encountering, but you're seeing this movie from the point of view of him. And you kind of also you start to reflect on yourself and wonder, it's like, well, how do I come off to people? What, like, and he's always on the outside and kind of looking in too. And even though all of these things, all of these pictures that he develops over and over and over, it only shows the surface level. And he himself is the surface level for the most part. But then when you kind of go further in, it's really it's disturbing because it's like his apartment is completely white. He wears nothing but beige or white clothes. Save Mart is completely white. It's just, it sort of makes me concerned. It's like not the whole thing about, is this my life? Am I only going to develop photos in a Save Mart? It's not that. It's sort of like wondering, is my existence determined on other people? Because he's clearly, again, the non-playable character. So
It's very much a photo without context, right?
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, so it's he only sees these snippets, these snapshots of life. He doesn't see the life around him, and that's what he desperately wants. But he's so divorced from it, he doesn't understand even the language of life.
Yeah, and it's funny because he only knows the people that he's obsessed with through their pictures, and only comes to find out later that yes, nothing. It's not all picture perfect. Oh, that's bad joke. I'm sorry. Which again kind of just circles back on itself because he's the one that develops them.
So in that respect, it's also like he is both the Greek chorus and the substitute for the viewer, right?
To a degree, but again, it's also the mundane fear of what if somebody did come into your life and begin stalking you like this, and obviously it's a little bit easier to do that now with social media and everybody's pictures are everywhere. This is kind of at the time before we were really getting into all of that. Yeah, you go to take your pictures developed, you're not really thinking about the guy on the other side who's looking at them. You're not thinking like, hey, this guy's going to see all my nude photos. That's not a consideration. You're not thinking about the fact that you're losing a bit of your own privacy through this. And now it's like, we obviously don't care about losing our privacy now.
It's also kind of like the impermanence of the moment, whereas a photo, it's a tangible thing, but it's only meaningful to the person who was in the photo, because everyone else will draw their own inferences. So it's kind of like the moment we live just is fleeting. So again, he has no sense of that because he doesn't understand the context. So I agree with you. I mean, there's no reason why 1 Hour Photo wouldn't be an elevated horror film if it was made today.
It's eerie all the way through. It's probably my favorite performance of Robin Williams. Also, there is the DVD commentary track on YouTube if anybody wants to listen to it. Robin Williams and the director, Mark Romanek. So, I mean, it's not going to be you're not going to actually watch the movie, but you can hear what they said about everything. And I love DVD commentary tracks for movies that I'm very much into.
So it's funny. I saw Crimes of the Future yesterday, and it made me think about the show that we were planning, and I realized like every Cronenberg film could be called elevated horror.
Including A Dangerous Method.
Okay, maybe not that.
Oh, come on, give it to me. Give this one to me.
Sure.
Like how can I make a Carl Jung reference? I
know. But yeah, I mean, something like Dead Ringers is all about the insinuation of our bodies as betraying us and becoming something beyond, but it's all inside two characters' heads. There's nothing overt. And I think that's pretty amazing. Whereas Crimes of the Future, everything is made overt that was hinted at in Dead Ringers and in Moments in the Fly, and definitely The Brood. Definitely that gets a bit more overt than the others, I'd say. But yeah, so I mean, to me, there's always been a lot of what we call elevated horror all around us. It's not new. It's not flashy. We just celebrate it today because I think we got used to cinema in general being dumbed down. So now there's a certain portion of the audience that wants desperately to say, "Lo, I like horror, but I'm smart. I'm smart. Watch, look, I'm smart."
I know we horror fans get a bad rap sometimes.
Yeah, and listen, there's times when I'm in the mood for trash, and there's times when I'm in the mood to have something shake me and make me think. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Absolutely not. I actually went and because I feel like Dark City is still horror because it has fucking Cenobites in it. So, but I mean that one is definitely more of, yeah, it's definitely neo-noir sci-fi, but there are a lot of horror elements. Like, what if you are just your memories, and what happens if those are taken away, and what happens if they can get scrambled up and pieced around? And I find it fascinating that the strangers are trying to figure this out, because they're trying to figure out, like, they need us to basically figure themselves out or survive because their race is dying. And I guess trying to understand the concept of a soul. And then I'm like, what does make up a soul? Is it memories? Is it some self-awareness? And also, I mean, Dark City itself is just, they're mishmashing everything. And it's like, you're just fucking around with the collective unconscious. And then you also have, like, and even if you do get that straightened out, per se, are we just the sum of all of our generations, all of the sum of the memories of previous generations? Do we not have any free will of our own? Are we always determined by our ancestors? And that's a scary thing too, is that lack of agency.
Well, that's the whole free will argument. Always pick a number between 1 and 10. Do you actively pick that number, or does something jump into your head? Well, if it jumps into your head, that's not free will.
No.
Now,
the thing is, the brain is not really something that generates thoughts. It reacts to things. And so, yeah, that's a good question. Now I'm going to start thinking about that. Fantastic.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a codified process under the conscious thought. Yes. And we know this because it's the same unconscious thought that makes us remove our hand from a burning pan. Right?
It's pain, nerves.
Sure, but you're still interpreting, hey, that hurts, I need to do something, but you don't put those into conscious thought or word. You react. There's levels of thought based on intuition, genetic information that's been passed down. Mm-hmm. And yeah, that does ultimately lead to the question of, are we really making the decisions in our lives? Or are those decisions ones we're following? So in other words, does our genetic code create a very faint trace line that we just color in and think that we're making those choices? And I think a film like Dark City is completely asking that question.
Mm-hmm. I love it. It's that movie's from 1998. Those graphics actually still hold up. Fucking A, man.
Yeah, a lot of miniatures put into motion, man. That's
how you do it.
It is how you do it. I wanted to talk about Don't Look Now, the Nicholas Roeg film.
I feel like saying that, but I can't remember.
This ties into Cronenberg nicely because Cronenberg just
Oh yeah, I remember that movie. Okay.
yeah, Cronenberg just mentioned that it is his favorite film if he's forced to pick a movie.
Interesting.
He objects to picking a movie, but when he does, if he's gun against the head, back to the wall. Don't Look Now is a film about grief and about the natural feelings of guilt that come with all loss of anyone or anything you care about. Because you could argue that it's not even the loss of a child necessarily that is the main impetus of the film. There's a very graphic for its time sex scene in the middle of the film that people still talk about because of the ways it's shot and how frank it is and how it was A-list actors performing it. What that is telling you is that it's about these two people who disconnected because of their own separate grief, and they kind of searching for a way to come together without disrespecting that grief, right? If you ever move on from your child's death, are you disrespecting your child by doing so? So how do you come together in a shared grief? Well, it means you got to see the actual traumatic events the same way. You need to come together and share and basically relive the event in a way so that you can have the same opinion on it, the same viewpoint on it. So it's a film that weaponizes a lot of in most horror films would be just taken for granted. Like the death of anyone in a horror film usually doesn't have a whole lot of impact. Usually it's like, oh, cool scene, good death scene, look at that special effect. This film gets its murder or its death out of the way very early and then makes you revel in the aftermaths. And a key mystery, and is it a ghost story? And if you've seen the film, you know where that leads, which is a complete subversion, which is appropriate because you're talking about two people with different opinions on a traumatic event that happened to them. If the film picked a side, it would be a disservice to the story. So it goes in a different direction. So true. Again, you release Don't Look Now today. I don't see how it doesn't get tagged as elevated horror.
Oh yeah, no, it definitely would. So lesser to the, less without the child death, but something that I also revisited, which it's free on Tubi. I recommend everybody go watch it, is the original the Japanese version of Dark Water by Hideo Nakata, who also gave us Ringu. And that movie is like, I really thought the American Dark Water, it's the remake of it, spot on. You really can't, like, I don't have a problem with the remake at all, but the original, it's very heartbreaking, and it definitely has the generational trauma. Like, my mother neglected me. I'm traumatized from that. I'm terrified of neglecting my daughter because I don't want to traumatize her because I know how that feels. And then also having the ghost involved as well. And it is aching to watch Yoshimi push her daughter away while she's in the elevator being clung to by this little Jirei. And it's like, that's a long drawn out scene. And she has to get visibly angry with her daughter to make her go back inside, to make her go away. And then the mother and I'm sorry, Mitsuko. I think it's Mitsuko. They just disappear up in that elevator back into the water tank. And then, of course, those elevator doors open, and we get a very Shining-esque sequence when all this disgusting, dirty water comes out and hits Ikuko at the very end. What I prefer about it to the remake is because the whole time I was thinking to myself, because it's been like 20 years since I watched the original Dark Water, I was thinking to myself, man, Ikuko is going to be fucked up. She's going to need so much therapy. I wonder if that, maybe they could make a sequel of this, with an older Ikuko, right? Oh, they did. Oh, it's at the end of the movie. I'm fucking dumb.
Exactly.
So 10 years later, and she's in high school, and she goes back to revisit that same apartment complex, which is now essentially condemned. And she has that chance to like speak with her mother as a ghost, not really realizing that she's a ghost. And it's just that movie still makes me fucking cry. Any iteration of it, every single time. And yeah, I mean, I don't see where that wouldn't be considered elevated horror now.
Exactly. And I think that it speaks a lot to that early movement of what people call the J-horror movement, although it was coming from a lot more countries than just Japan.
I mean, the majority of the stuff that we got over here from J-horror was all elevated horror.
All of it. All of it. And I think that that's why it stood out so much at the time. We were still reeling from the teen slasher thing. And here comes J-horror. Here comes Ringu. Here comes Royale. Here comes Ghost Car, which if you haven't seen Ghost Car, check out Ghost Car. Look at Nam Nok, from great Vietnamese horror film. Look at the Whispering Staircase film. Yeah, I mean, that whole sense of meaning embedded in these ghost stories. It's 360 degrees from something like the Conjuring universe, which I'm not a big Conjuring universe fan, but I am an Insidious fan. So I'm not, again, against the idea of a film that's more of like pulpy thrills. Give me my pulpy thrills. They still have, by the way, the worst pulp film out there that works still has meaning. It's just operating at a level, whereas that meaning is taken for granted. It's not part of the narrative. It's just why you respond to it. So again, Halloween is about that late 70s fear of urban crime spilling out into the suburbs. We don't have to get explicit about that. It's there. It's in the movie visually, and that's all they needed to do. I wonder if the generation that don't really remember that time period have exactly the same perspective on Halloween as those who were there. The original Amityville Horror is a film about buying too much house and being and a mortgage crushing a family. I mean, is that important to whether Geordie the pig ghost is scary or not? Probably not. But it's the reason the movie's narrative works. Now, you could make an elevated horror version of that. You could do that. But I would argue you're going to lose some great stuff like a voice screaming "Get Out," So I think there's a good place for both approaches. One of my favorite films of all time, the 1942 version of Cat People, is it's amazing to think in 1942 you have a film that is starkly about the repression of female sexuality. And how women were actually afraid to be sexual beings because of in this case, the folklore from the old country. I mean, you can't get more explicit about what's going on there, right? But she's worried that if she falls in love and becomes knowledgeable of her suitor, that I'm trying to use the terminology of the time, then she will become a beast.
That's usually what happens when we get a good dicking.
Yeah. But it's fascinating that think about the time period. Think about what of an uphill climb that had to have been, right?
Yeah.
We're going to tell that story. And that's why the bus sequence and the walk through the park, which is kind of the standout sequence of the film, although I think there's all kinds of standout moments in that movie. But that sequence in particular, the fact that you never see the monster cat, you never see it, is telling you that it's meant to be taken on a different level. It's not the physical threat that's most important. Not to say that the physical threat's not there, but that's not what's important in the narrative. And that's not what the film is aiming to tell you.
Yeah.
A remarkable film that, it's funny, they remade it in 83, 82. And they took all the subtlety out of it. But the other thing they did is they took all of the subtext out of it too.
Well, I hate to say it, it's a little predictable for an 80s movie, though.
Yeah, and that's the problem is the idea of the original film doesn't work in a time of sexual liberation like the 1980s. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
It was an inappropriate thing to remake. Now, are there things I like about the movie? Yeah, there are. Much like there's things I like about The Hunger, another film at the time period that's overly stylized and doesn't accomplish really anything. But there's things I like about it. But yeah, so I mean, we can go back to 1942 for what I consider an elevated horror film.
Yeah, and I mean, I have to, kind of segue into this, bringing up, some of these feminist themes, but I can't get over, okay, because you're the one that told me about this, is, Candyman is an elevated horror film.
Absolutely.
And, you explained it to me, your interpretation, which I never thought about it before, but just regarding Helen as sort of like she's getting older, she's seeing her husband flirting with the younger woman, and Helen is actually just doing all of this. There's no Candyman. And it makes sense because, as you mentioned, it was all you, Helen. It was always you, Helen. And she's trying to cope with the fact that, yes, she's childless and getting older and getting to the point where she's no longer able to bear children. And that is, ladies, I hate to break it to you. You're probably all going to get there at some point. You're going to have this issue come up in your psyche. So get ready. It's really not fun. So don't kidnap anybody's baby or anything like that. Please. You might get, burned alive at a bonfire. We wouldn't want that. Wait, where was I going? Anyway. No, but I mean, that is a very, in the way that giving into our sexuality is, it can be a fear. It was a fear for me for a long time. And now that I am approaching that age where it's like, I'm already, if I got pregnant tomorrow, I'd already be a geriatric pregnancy. I would have been a geriatric pregnancy like 3 fucking years ago, probably. But yeah, it's at that point where it's like, hey, you're too old to have kids. Hope you don't want any. And I'm like, but wait. So yeah, it's kind of that thing where, it's that fear made real. And I can't unsee it in Candyman anymore, which is cool. But I still,
I kind of destroyed it for you too, right?
No, because I think it makes total sense, and it's probably the most interesting interpretation I've heard. So,
well,
I'm going to bring that up for sure, and I think we can all agree Candyman is elevated.
Yeah, definitely, without a question. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, Candyman's core setup sequence is a business meeting at dinner, and the whole point is that Helen feels necessary to kind of showcase what she's doing to keep up with the boys. Exactly. Oh, I'm going to do this piece about this research project about Candyman. And think about how the elder statesman, is sitting there. Oh, I did a piece on that years ago, and yeah, right. she's decided to follow her career rather than the traditional mother provider role. Have the baby, be the mother, take the year off. It would put her behind, and she's chasing that career path.
And she's still being dismissed,
absolutely,
even in her career, even when her husband usurps, I think, one of the ideas that she had for a lecture or part of something that she was working on for his own class. And so, yeah, she's stuck in this place where it's she can't, her career isn't going anywhere because she keeps running into these dead ends, whether it's, other men holding her down, including her own husband, which it's that's enough of a mindfuck anyway. And then it's she can't even, she's at the point where it's she can't even do her biological function, which would be to have a kid, right? Saying go do that. Nobody at me, okay? But it's her body can't even carry out her biological function, or it's getting close to the point where she can't anyway. So it's where does she go as a person? What is her she's that purpose as a person is kind of missing for her.
Absolutely, and that's why the spoilers for a film that you better have seen by now, but that's why that final sequence of her husband with his new girlfriend, live-in girlfriend, I presume, student, is so important to the narrative. It wouldn't be there if this movie wasn't about what it's about, and ultimately, Helen has become the monster. She's become the urban legend. And I think that it's a brilliant film. It's the best of its decade.
Definitely.
And it's sad because without even picking on the most recent one, none of the sequels understood the original enough to do anything meaningful with the concept. They just dove headlong, either in the case of the first two sequels, into supernatural slasher. Cool but empty, right? Yeah, Tony Todd's great. Whatever.
I like the backstory for Daniel Robitaille, but I mean, it just feels like something's missing.
Well, but so the original backstory, right? The idea he falls in love with a woman and father disapproves and he gets killed for it, basically, right? Well, that kind of plays completely into as a dark mirror of Ellen's situation. You know,
well, there's a mirror. Like I think the magic mirror's in 2, isn't it? Or is it 3?
Yeah, it's the end of 2.
Okay.
I've only seen 3 once, and I never intend to refresh my memory. Though, I mean, I had less fun, I think, with the 4th film, but the 4th film is a better film than the 3rd, but I had less fun with it.
But
simply because it misunderstood. Like, it misunderstood the original film so fundamentally and tried to change it into an easy topical subject.
Yeah, but we wouldn't have like the whole say his name art exhibit in 4 if that hadn't already happened in 3.
Yeah.
I know this is not the hate the Candyman prequel.
No. But it does go to point when we talked earlier about there being a place for, all different storytelling techniques, including those that are thought of as smarter, which is an illusion. Like, the problem with Candyman is Candyman works as intricate storytelling. It doesn't particularly work as surface level slasher stuff, in my opinion. I mean, all this is our opinions. We shouldn't have to say that, but I wanted to talk about the other, Thomas Tryon adaptation, because if anything's ever been elevated, it's that movie. It's a remarkable slow burn period piece about 2 twins, one of which.
What year was that? I'm not familiar with it.
72.
72? Okay.
I want to say 72. I might be completely off. But it's exactly working on the themes of like a small community's reaction to trauma. It kind of takes it takes a village statement we all know and weaponizes it in a way that is really profound. It says, okay, so if it takes a village, then whose fault is it when it goes wrong?
Yeah.
And that's such a cool concept, right? Because we love bumper stickers that sound nice. Hey, what if we threw a war and no one came? Well, that's fine as long as the other side plays by those rules, right? Otherwise, we call it a massacre.
Yeah.
What if the Air Force had to have a bake sale? Well, that's fine until you need an Air Force. You might have cookies, but you definitely are going to need more than cookies. But so for like an artist like Tom Tryon to take on a concept like that and turn it into a novel and then adapt it to a screenplay for a film, it's not the easy go for a horror film, right? I hate to say this because I'm going to go back to The Exorcist for a second, right? In the wave of films that came after The Exorcist, and there was a ton of them that ripped it off, a lot of them from Italy and Spain, and to this day, there's still exorcism films that borrow all the visual language of those movies, but they don't try and do anything with the concept. And that's why you don't care about any possession films that aren't called Exorcist or Exorcist 2. I mean, maybe Omen 2, but not Omen 2, Amityville 2, for its cheap thrills, but there hasn't been a significantly great possession film outside those 2 titles because those 2 titles went for more. Because possession, by its nature, is a concept that works well with advanced storytelling. Men with knives with white masks, you don't need advanced storytelling, and advanced storytelling probably gets in your way.
Yeah, I could see that. Did you read the book as well?
Yep. I thought I had it within arm's reach, but I don't.
Well, I don't think anybody's not going to believe that you don't own a book.
I have his Harvest Home right there, but which of course was made into a great TV movie called The Dark Secrets of Harvest Home, which was a miniseries, which if you have a chance, definitely check out. It's really good.
Okay.
So, Tom Tryon was one of those guys, the pre-King like horror aces that once was King hit, man, off the map. We don't have room for you, and it's a damn shame.
Yeah, and don't you love it when it's like the new horror movie comes out or the new horror book, and it's like it's Stephen King inspired, and I'm just like, I don't care.
Oh, really? I'll look at.
I could go read Stephen King then.
Yeah, I'll try someone else then. Yeah. And that's probably pretty unfair because that's all marketing. But I mean, that's why like when I discovered Kathy Koja and Brian Hodge, like those two figures were just titans for me because they were not in any way, shape, or form just trying to be Stephen King. And that was an amazing thing when you think 91 and 92.
Yeah. As far as like the other goes, what is it like? What would you say that the book does better than the movie, and movie does better than the book? Or is it like a fairly even? No, because I know that there are solid film adaptations of novels.
Yeah, they're very, very. It's a very close adaptation. I'd say that the book does voice better. You get a voice for the time period a little bit more clearly than the movie because you don't get as many people's perspective. It narrows the focus a little bit. For a film about it takes a town. But on the other hand, the film does such a great job of texture. You really feel the rural town. You feel where they are, and both in history and as an insular town. Like it was a time period, whereas every town probably has more of its own identity than today. Like today, you drive through any well-established town, and you see the same big box stores and the same chain restaurants, right? None of that was on the map, even 40 years ago, let alone 60 years ago or 100 years ago. And I think that the towns had much greater personalities, and the people who lived in them couldn't help but kind of be part of that personality. And I think they both present that differently. The book does a really great job in the voices of the characters and the world that they live in and their daily lives. And the movie does a great job of giving that structure, and you get a real feel for what that kind of life must be like to live. So it's one of those cases where I would say it's almost inevitable that if you read the book, you want to see the film and you won't be disappointed. And if you see the film, you probably want to read the book and you won't be disappointed either.
Well, I just looked it up briefly because I haven't seen it, and I'm like, astral projection, I'm there. You say possession, I say astral projection. We can have a good time.
Exactly. And that's not even the big thing about the book or the movie.
No, I mean, it usually isn't. It's just something to get everything going.
Yeah. So I really wanted to do this show just to talk about elevated horror because it's something that's come up so consistently recently. And yet I think it's kind of underexplored, the fact that it's always been with us.
Yeah. I forgot one from 92 also. Fucking Jacob's Ladder.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Oh, 100%. I mean, it inspired Silent Hill. Fuck's sake.
Well, Jacob's Ladder, of course, spoilers again for a film you better have seen by now. It's an occurrence of Owl Creek's Bridge, basically, made into a Vietnam set, allegory. But it's great. It's intricate. Everything has a meaning. Like all the demonic visions all mean something and can be decoded in their own. It's not just a bunch of creepy shit. Yeah,
no, I mean, I never really interpreted it that way. Also, correction, it's from 1990, not 92.
I saw it in the theater, but I'm old.
Well, the years all blend together. It's fine. No, but I mean, like, the thing is, I can't even remember the Bible story of Jacob's ladder off the top of my head. But I know it has something to do with getting to heaven. So, but also interestingly enough, is if you ever like get into some of the more metaphysical interpretations of the Bible, it's and not even just the Bible, but artwork in general. You'll see ladders in a lot of different works, and usually that has something to do with the double helix structure of our DNA, which I always think is very interesting. So I'm sure I can't give you guys any good sources right now, not off the top of my head, but no, I mean Jacob's ladder I always interpret it as just like obviously he's stuck in limbo. He's trying to essentially get to heaven or out of purgatory.
There's all that post Thomas Aquinas theology built into it.
Mm-hmm.
I think again, the horror genre gets looked at as kind of this debased form of expression or entertainment, not even expression, and it's the only place that can do some of this stuff because you couldn't go to these places in any other genre. There's just no guardrails that allow it, whereas the horror genre really doesn't have guardrails. Only the guardrails that we impose at a time. But you know what? There's always someone like a Cronenberg or a George Romero or a Toby Hooper that's willing to say, nah, fuck that. We're going right over those rails. And you don't see that happen in other genres.
I mean, who are a couple of the last filmmakers to do it? Because all I'm thinking of is Robert Eggers and Ari Aster, like within the last couple of years.
Well, Rose Glass certainly with Saint Maud, right?
Oh, sorry. Yes, that is true. She did that movie wonderfully. It was lovely.
I think that's a film. I think Saint Maud is a film that
it's going to age very well.
It's going to, and its reputation is only going to grow into something really beautiful. But I do fear the movie in a way because I try to stop myself from reaching to watch it because I have a feeling it probably is my favorite A24 film, but I won't let go of Hereditary. So I limit the amount of watches that I give Saint Maud. And I know that's really dumb, but that's like stupid Lauren shit.
If that's the dumbest anxiety that you have, I will fucking trade you. Holy shit!
Oh, I wish that was it.
Let me tell you about my teeth again.
So, can we just? I don't mind if people want to use the words elevated horror to mean something, but I guess what the plea is from my side, and then we'll talk about how you feel about it. But my side is like, stop using it to either feel better about what you're watching or to kind of sneer at what other people are watching. It's like if you don't like what they're calling elevated horror, if you don't like the A24 stuff, if you'd never watched Don't Look Now in a million years, that's cool. No, I'm not here to criticize you. You found what makes sense for you. And there's nothing bad. It's not a progression. The horror genre is very much like evolution. It goes wherever it goes. It's not a ladder. We're not trying to get to some perfect being here. We're just trying to figure out like what scares us, why does it scare us, what disgusts us, why does it disgust? What do we find darkly funny? That's what we're all here for, and the answers are going to be different for everyone. So I guess whether you're a proponent of elevated horror, or if you hate elevated horror, or if like Sam and I, you kind of wish that everyone would just like take every project one by one and enjoy what's there. Let's have a lot of respect for everyone in the community's views on this stuff, because unless you're actively saying that the other person is wrong, there's a reason why you've come down where you've come down, and it's legit. So I am very, very proud to say I love Jason X, and I love Hereditary and Saint Maud.
Fuck yeah. I mean, Sam? I would just say just stop using it because it just doesn't. Nobody cares. Doesn't mean anything. It's just extra syllables. Now, I'll make this caveat. It's if you are fairly new to horror and you're just kind of getting into it, and it's because you found elevated horror, within the last couple of years, and now when everybody's starting to reference it that way, I understand. But you could also just go and search for psychological horror and find a lot of gems that are, not, again, not recent. So yeah, it's just Drop the Elevated is cool. If if you want something weird and something like more of like something that makes you think that's also still a horror movie, ask around. People on Twitter will give you recommendations all day long, and ones that you would not have ever thought of. But, don't limit yourself. Just get rid of the elevated thing.
We may just manage to have this entire conversation and not mention the Babadook. I'm proud of us.
I still like the Babadook. No,
I do too.
sorry.
I do too.
Well, I was also a line in Scream 5. It's like the only thing I remember.
Yeah.
No, Babadook's fucking awesome. It's fucking rocking forever. I'll always love the Babadook.
Absolutely. So this is the point on any other channel, whereas the hosts will ask you to leave your thoughts about elevated horror in the comments. We don't really want you to do that. Just do whatever you're going to do in the comments. We don't really care if you thumbs up the video or anything like that. We just want you to have a good time when you do show up to hang out with us. Sam, any final thoughts tonight?
No. Go watch Jacob's Ladder in Dark City.
That is fair enough.
Damn straight.
Have a good one, guys.
Like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff.
Oh, Lauren's here. He says, slept through my alarm equals overdosed on laxatives and painkillers, fell asleep on the toilet. Damn you, Lauren. You know me so well. I watched like 3 movies from 2021.